Hey everybody, Jean Lafitte here, and I want to take you through how I retouch portraits in a professional way. Now, I don't go crazy with my editing. I don't do dodging and burning and all that stuff unless something's really wrong, but I just want to show you the basics and how I do some frequency separations that I can clean up skin texture and stuff like that. So let's get into it. So what I like to do first and foremost is just duplicate the layer that is brought in. So I'm going to hit Control J, that duplicates it, and that way I know this is the original, just so I have something to go back to in case I mess something up. Then what I like to do is call the next layer Cleanup. So on the cleanup layer, I'm going to go ahead and clean up the hairs. Now the tool I use for this is the spot healing brush. So it's under the J tool. If you press J on your keyboard, and then it's this top option here. If you're on something else, like say the patch tool, you can just click and hold on this button and go to the spot healing brush, or hit Shift and then J to cycle through the different tools until you see this symbol here. Now in the top, you're going to want to set your tool to content aware in normal mode. And then I have sample all layers turned off, and that's because in frequency separation, it will do some funny things when we get to that point. So I'm just going to clean up these stray hairs by drawing over them, and it's generally, Photoshop does an amazing job with their content aware stuff since it's been out for a long time, and Adobe Sensei has been improved immensely. So I'm just going to clean up any stray hairs that are against the black background, again because those are usually a little trickier to clean up in frequency separation. I'm also going to clean up a little bit on the clothing just because that is going to be different than frequency separation, although you could technically do it either way. All right, so it's time to do the actual frequency separation. Now, what I like to do is zoom in to the canvas to 100%, so I'm seeing pixel for pixel what's happening. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because with frequency separation, we have to really see how much detail we're keeping. So frequency separation is something that all industry professional retouchers use. And what it does is it separates the texture from the color of the skin so that you can manipulate them individually. I'll put a link in the description below with a really easy action to install, and you can use them and watch tutorials on them if you'd like to, but this is just going to give you an overview of how I use it. I try to keep it really simple. So I'm going to go into my actions because I've already installed it, and you're going to see that I have a few different frequency separation options. What we want to choose is frequency separation 16-bit, and the reason is if we use 8-bit, the color profile won't match and it's going to mess up your image quality. So use 16-bit most definitely. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit play. Now, this is the part where the detail comes into play, why we zoomed in to 100%. So if I bring the radius of this Gaussian blur down to 1 or 0, basically, you can start to increase it, and then the idea is to blur out the image just enough to where the texture is no longer visible, but only the color. And I'm gonna keep pushing it up. We don't want all the spots to blend in, but just the texture, like whatever you would consider texture. So for this photo, which is 33 megapixels, I'm gonna put the blur radius at about 9. That works for this particular image. So again, it'll be different for every picture. I'm gonna hit OK, and the rest of the action is going to play out. I'm going to close my action window because I don't need it anymore. Now what you're going to notice is there were 2 layers created. One is called high frequency, one is called low frequency. So these are the separations. So let me see if I can describe this. The high frequency is this layer. So this is a very special type of blend mode, and it's called linear light. And there was processing applied to this using a high pass filter and all sorts of stuff. It gets a little tricky, so that's why it's really nice to just install an action because it's all automated for you. But just know that this is the texture layer. Now, if I disable this layer and turn on low frequency, this is just the color layer. So it's no texture at all. And what's really great about this is if I turn both of them on, is I can manipulate the texture separately from the color, which you'll see in a minute makes a big difference. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the clone stamp tool by hitting S on my keyboard. It's also over here if you click and hold clone stamp tool. And I'm going to go ahead and start sampling. So with the clone stamp tool, you sample on a clean part of skin, and then you paint, and you'll see that the paint over happens where the sample is. Now you'll notice, even though I took that texture away, the color is still there. So we're gonna have to blend that later, and I'll show you how. So for now, I'm just gonna quickly go through and I'm gonna start texture painting over all the red spots or the flaws that I want to remove. And it's a good idea to sample often so that you don't start to see patterns in the texture. You want to be very careful of that. And this just takes practice. As you work, you'll begin to see how the clone stamp tool functions, and it'll become second nature to you in no time. Also, try to think about what texture you're pulling from and how it can match better. So say I want to cover this area here. Well, if I pull texture from over here, it's going to not match. It's going to look kind of funky. So I want to pull from something with similar texture, which would be maybe right here. And you can see that looks a lot more natural. All right, so once I finished applying the texture changes, I'm gonna go ahead and go all the way zoomed out just to kind of get a 1,000-foot view of what's happening. So now I'm gonna switch into frequency separation low, the low layer. Now this is where it gets a little different than what you may be experienced with when it comes to retouching, but basically we're going to switch to the brush tool, but not just the regular brush tool. We're going to click and hold or cycle through until we get to the mixer brush tool. And these settings are very specific. I'm sure that there are people who know way better than me exactly what's happening and can tweak them. So I've got the brush hardness set to 50%. Clean the brush after each stroke turned on. The wetness is 40%, the load is 20%, the mix is 20%, the flow is 20%. You can adjust the flow depending on if you want it to be a more strong effect or a lighter effect. And then I have sample all layers turned off. And then what I'm gonna do is start painting the color and brightness of the skin that I want over the parts that I don't. So let me just use this red spot here as an example. So I'd like it to match more of this tone here. I don't want this light tone, I don't want this dark tone, but kind of right here. So what I'm gonna do is click here and drag that tone into the red, just like that. And I'm just gonna do multiple passes and keep dragging in, and you'll notice that slowly over time, that redness will be taken over by the color that I want. Now you have to be careful because I don't want to take this darkness and streak it all the way up on his cheek and look weird. And you also have to be careful to make sure that you're following the natural light and shadow pattern that is on his face. So I don't want to mess anything up and make it look goofy. And this is better done in a subtle manner rather than in an extreme manner. So just take it easy, one bit at a time, until you get the results that you are looking for. And I'm gonna just start kind of blending these colors together and keeping in mind the shape of his face. And you'll notice what's really cool about this is I am not affecting the texture at all, just the color. So that's the power of frequency separation. I'm not creating any weird texture issues by changing the coloration on the skin. All right, so that's looking pretty good. What I'm gonna do now is hop back into high frequency, switch back to the clone stamp tool, and then just make any final tweaks to things that are standing out now that we have the color fixed. Awesome, there we go. I think that's pretty good. I would consider that pretty much done. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching this retouching tutorial. If you have any questions or any suggestions, leave them down below. And if you learned something, please like the video and consider subscribing so that you can be kept up to date on all my latest tutorials and learn some cool stuff. That's it. Have a good one. Bye.